This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglan.
Spring. It's a good time to think about travel. Migrating songbirds have already done this, coming back to Kentucky and your backyard for the nesting season. We'll talk about ideas for making your yard one of their favorite destinations. And people like to wander, too, to see what's astir around our state for fun and adventure. Our friend Seth Wheat with the Kentucky Office of Adventure Tourism stops in with suggestions. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio. A cold one on a sunny day. What could be more perfect?
My life changed forever when I was 13. That's the day a drunk boater ran me over.
Too many know the cost.
I lost my leg as a result, and a brain injury robbed me of my short-term memory.
Sober boating saves more than lives.
It saves doctor visits. It saves prosthetics. It saves time in court. It saves worry. It saves the pain of a mother. It saves nightmares. It saves time in lawyers' offices. It saves stares everywhere I go. It saves a billion awkward situations. It saves endless surgeries. It saves tears. It saves paperwork. It saves post-traumatic stress. What are you looking at? Sober boating could have saved me. So don't drink and boat.
Something from the cooler? How about an ice-cold regret?
Put that note on your boat, in case you forget.
Party on a boat? Safe. Kentucky Boating and Conservation Officers and boating tragedy survivors everywhere remind you, sober boating saves lives. Welcome to Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Charlie Baglan. Backyard bird feeding and outdoor adventure are the subjects this week. Songbird expert Kate Slankard will join us in our next half hour. Meanwhile, spring is definitely here. Crappie fishing, spring turkey season, horse racing, school field trips. The list is long. And likely no one knows this better than the Kentucky Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet. That includes Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, state parks, travel, and more. Part of that, of course, is the Office of Adventure Tourism, with options for you and your family for the spring season. We welcome back Mr. Seth Wheat, who has been about as far away from Kentucky as you can possibly get.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me back, as always.
You know, it seems like we missed a month. Did we miss a month or miss a season?
I think we're just a little late. I don't think we've missed. I think we're just a couple weeks later than we have been the past couple years. But it's been a while since I've been in here.
It has been. I can't remember what all the things were that I would give you grief about when you came.
Nothing.
Coffee.
I can't
Coffee was one of them.
Anything I would have gotten grief about.
Your necktie.
Yes.
Mr. Outdoor Adventure, and I love the striped shirt, pinstripe shirt, and the ties. I mean, it's fitting.
I'm a man of many hats, Charlie, and outfits.
People would be, I'm sure this happens to other people too, but our emails back and forth. I will email you about 4 times a year, and it'll say 2 words.
It's time.
It's time. But I like how you came back to, well, I'm giving an event in Moorhead right now, and then I'm going to go for 10 days in Romania, of all places.
Yes, Romania, of all places.
What was the trip to Romania about? Spring break?
No, it was to visit family, actually.
Really?
Yeah. My fiance, her sister's family moved over to Romania last fall for her brother-in-law's job. They're going to be over there for a period of a couple of years, and we saw them at Christmas, haven't seen them since Christmas, and we were able to get some dates strung together where we could work a trip in. So we went over there to visit them, and why else would I pick Romania? You know, that's kind of what I thought at the beginning, and so that was as good of a reason as any to go over there, and we had a great time. Romania was an awesome place.
Were you able to turn off the travel adventure side of Seth Wheat and just be a tourist or a normal person? And were you analyzing? Were you looking at everything you did over there from a corporate sort of sense?
I was. This was my first trip out of the country. So everything we did, I compared it to how we do things here in Kentucky. And, yeah, you always think about that, I think.
10 days is a good amount of time to be in a foreign country. Mm-hmm. I happened to live in the country of Spain in 1982.
Yeah.
And after a while, you start to forget English. You become absorbed into the culture. You're immersed in the language. And when I got back to New York, trust me, English was a foreign language.
Is that right?
It was interesting. I was still talking and thinking in Spanish. Did you see anything Kentucky and Romania? I'm hoping you say KFC.
Yes, primarily KFC and McDonald's. Most people had absolutely heard of Kentucky and had a good idea of where it was. And the most common response to Kentucky was, do you want to guess what it was?
It would have to be basketball, Muhammad Ali, horse racing.
Nope.
What?
You're getting more. Bourbon.
Bourbon, of course.
It was bourbon.
We should talk about things that there are to see and do in Kentucky this spring. I put very first on my list, coming up on the first day of May, a Monday, Fish and Wildlife Surplus Auction. Have you ever been to that event?
You know I haven't, but I've always been meaning to go to one. You do 2 a year, is that right?
We do 2 a year. There's like a vehicle auction in October.
Okay.
But the surplus, this would be anything from boats to bows, rifles.
Yeah.
It's something to see. Anyway, that's at the Fish and Wildlife Headquarters, US 60 in Frankfort, on Monday, the very first day of May this year.
Have you been?
Oh, yeah, every year.
You every year?
And there is always quite a crowd. What's on your list that's key that you want to bring up?
Well, right before I left the country, we hosted a big conference for all of my trail towns, which I've talked about here on the show numerous times, and the conference isn't very exciting, but what we did at the end of it was we certified Slade, Kentucky, a community in Powell County, as our 15th certified trail town. And for people who have listened to me before, they kind of know what that is. For those that haven't, a trail town is a community that has bought into the idea of adventure tourism, of the things that I do, and they have made connections from a town center to a nearby trail system or a nearby river or a place to recreate. And so Slade, people that like to rock climb will know Slade. That's in the middle of the Red River Gorge. And it's also home to Natural Bridge State Resort Park, one of our most popular state parks. There's a zip line right outside of Slade. The Red River Gorge zip line is there. There is the Thrillsville Adventure Park. There are a couple of really good, well-known restaurants in Slade. Primarily is Miguel's Pizza, which has become, world famous in the rock climbers community. And so Slade is just a really cool small town in Powell County, and they're working to try to better their local economy and better their community through more promotion of these outdoor adventures and this outdoor recreation. So that's the big thing on my list. That was the... Again, the 15th town, the first one we've done in 2017. Yeah, so we're very excited about it.
Slade's got it going on.
It is, and the nice thing, too, is that it's very close to a lot of people in Kentucky or people in Cincinnati or Tennessee or wherever. It's not even an hour outside of Lexington. It's very easy to get to.
Derby's coming up. So for this week leading up to Derby Day,
the Kentucky Derby website has a lot of good information on it. It's got information on all the horses, a bit of their history, their racing history. If you were lucky enough to get a ticket to go to the Derby, make use of the folks who work there. There are people there who can help you, inform you on ways to bet and give you suggestions and advice.
If you're out and about and like most that can't go, don't have a ticket, some other things are going on Derby weekend, May 5th and 6th. This is one I've always liked, going to yard sales and picking up treasures. Spring Campers Yard Sale at Levi Jackson State Park. Because I'm hoping maybe I could pick up on some good camping gear.
You would think you'd be able to. I bet that's a really fun event.
Levi Jackson State Park, May 5th, and also going on at Lake Barkley State Resort Park, the second annual Owl Weekend. Nice if you like wildlife.
Yeah, so the Owl Weekend at Lake Barkley, it's a pretty new event. Like you just mentioned, it's only the second year they've done it. You do need tickets. It's a 2-day event, Friday and Saturday nights. I think tickets looks like $35 a person. And if you just want to go visit the program, they do a live Birds of Prey program, which sounds like a lot of fun. I think you all do similar stuff up here.
We do.
So our folks in West Kentucky, if they're not able to come all the way to Salado, just run down to Lake Barkley State Park, do their second annual Owl Weekend.
I've heard them called Owl Prowls.
Owl Prowls.
I've heard that, but this is the Owl Weekend at Lake Barkley. It's kind of hard to do a show about travel in Kentucky, Seth, that we're not talking often about state parks. They have these first day hikes, like the first Saturday of every month, they'll have a different hike on a different trail in one of their parks. And the one I saw right here before me was Pennyrile.
Yeah.
But this is going on in other parks too, right?
It is. Several of them will have first day hikes. Several parks also participate in the second Saturday hike program, which is very similar to the second Saturday of the month. What you need to do to see all of these hikes is go on to parks.ky.gov, and you can check out their interactive calendar. But most all of our state resort parks also have a naturalist. And these naturalists are the folks who will take you out and lead you on these guided hikes, and sometimes they'll point out local flora or fauna or whatever else. But it's a great way to experience and get more familiar with some of our state parks.
Ideas for outdoor adventure this spring. We'll have more after the break. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. We're back on Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglan. Back with Seth Wheat with the Kentucky Office of Adventure Tourism. Did you get enough coffee while you were away?
Yes, I was able to get sufficiently caffeinated every day, so thank you for asking.
Well, I worry about you, Seth.
I understand, and I appreciate it.
Your search engine on the KentuckyTourism.com website is worthy of a blue ribbon.
It is a very useful tool. I'm glad you like it, and I know you use it. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in traveling around Kentucky to use it also. You can find events, you can find destinations, you can find attractions. It's powered in a way that we try to give the information to folks in a very useful manner. And so I'm always happy to hear feedback like yours, and if you have other feedback, you can certainly give that to us as well. But the way we try to set up our website, and right now I'm speaking specifically about the adventure tourism site, but I think the same can also be said for the larger Kentucky tourism webpage, is that people either know where they're going in Kentucky and they want to know what they can do there, or they know what they want to do but don't know exactly where to do it. So if I was a mountain biker and I didn't know where I could go mountain biking, I could search that on our website, and then I'd find a list of all the places that have mountain biking trails. Or if perhaps I was visiting Elizabethtown, Kentucky for whatever reason, maybe I had a basketball tournament there, I was from out of state, and I wanted to know, well, what is there to do while I'm in Elizabethtown? I could search Elizabethtown and find out, oh, wow, there's great mountain biking in and around Elizabethtown, so I'll bring my bike when I come. So it's kind of like that. We wanted to make it, a useful, interactive tool, and so far I think people have really enjoyed it.
And you can search by city, you can search by time of year, search by activity. There's a lot of different criteria you can put into this search engine.
Absolutely.
And the website there are two, KentuckyTourism.com, and for the adventure side is what?
Go to KentuckyTourism.com/outdoor adventure. But the easiest way to remember, KentuckyTourism.com, and then you can navigate to the adventure page from there. To back up, and we talked about this in our winter episode a couple months ago, every January, Carter Caves does an adventure weekend, and they have all this great activity that goes on, and it's been a wildly successful event for them, and has been very well attended. And so Carter Caves is such a great park for outdoor recreation that they wanted to offer some more stuff at other times of the year. And so now they're bringing the zip line back, which has long been a feature of their winter adventure weekend, and they're bringing it back over Derby weekend. So again, like you said, if you can't make it to the Derby, like most of us can't, then maybe go zip line out at Carter Caves, see what all they've got to offer.
You can do all these things all day long. Derby's not going to be till supper time anyway.
That's right.
So you've got plenty of time to play all day long. I always like to get in a plug for the Moonbow weekends.
It is such a unique Kentucky event, Kentucky happening, that everyone who lives here really deserves to go see it. They really should go see it.
It's kind of something you have to plan.
You do.
And, of course, if it's cloudy or hazy, you have to have a full moon, but if it's cloudy or hazy, you're not going to see it. So it has to be clear, and it has to be a full moon, or maybe a day or two either side of that full moon. So you got like a 4-day or so window that you can see it. You're
right. You do need to plan, but to help make the planning easier, go to the state park website, parks.ky.gov, and depending on which specific day you were there, you should be able to find out, okay, I need to be there at 10 o'clock at night, or maybe one day it's better at midnight or 1 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So you can plan accordingly, and then you can kind of check the weather forecast based on when you're able to go. Not that a trip to Cumberland Falls is ever a wasted trip, because there's so much fun stuff to do there, but if you go primarily to see the moonbow, make sure you're able to give yourself the best chance of seeing it.
The full moon weekends coming up May 10th, June 9th, and again July 9th. These are the days of the peak of the nights of the peak full moon. It won't be the same day every month, but they're always a month apart. Mother's Day is coming up on May 14th. Father's Day on June 18th.
I think a lot of people might enjoy a day spent hiking with Mom or Dad on Mother's Day or Father's Day.
Fishing is an opportunity. If you like to fish, you could go up to most mothers and say, hey, do you want to go fishing on Mother's Day with your kids? They might say, well, I don't know, I may find something else we could do together. But if you frame it by saying, would you like to go fishing? Because that will afford you the opportunity to sit and talk.
Yeah.
And you will catch up on what they're doing in their life, and you can tell a little bit more about you. Let's have this quiet time together. It may last 2 or 3 hours. And they may say, yeah, I'm ready for that. So fishing is a pretty cool thing. And it applies for Mother's Day. It applies Father's Day, too.
Sure. And, I think you hit on the main point there. Outside of special planned events or cards or gifts or meals or whatever else, just make sure you spend time with them. Catch up.
Yeah, you can go to the Little League game or the baseball field and watch your kid play.
Mm-hmm.
But in fishing, you're together. You're doing this together.
Yeah.
That makes all the difference. Free Fishing Weekend is coming up. That is the first consecutive Saturday and Sunday in June. So June 3 and June 4, Free Fishing Weekend. And what that means is there is no license required. If you don't have a fishing license, if you're a kid, you don't need one anyway, if you're under 16. But anybody else over 16, you don't need a license. Haven't done it in a while, want to pull that rod and reel out of the garage, give it a whirl, you can go. You don't have to buy a license for that weekend. All the other rules do apply, but at least you don't have to be out the $20 expense for the annual fishing license.
Yeah, that's a really busy weekend, that first weekend in June. You know what else we have going on then?
What?
That is the birthday of Kentucky, our 225th birthday. That weekend.
Happy birthday to the state.
Happy birthday, Kentucky. Happy birthday to the state. The Department of Tourism is doing a year-long celebration of our 225th birthday. There are several events going on all throughout the year, but the main culmination is that weekend, the first weekend in June. And you can go to ky225.com, and you can see all the stuff that's going on. You can learn about Kentucky's history. And if you're around that weekend, there's a number of fun stuff going on then, too. We have put together a bucket list of 225 things to do in Kentucky. There's at least one thing from every county in Kentucky, all 120 counties. So when you go out and you go to these events or you go see these historic sites or do whatever it is you do to help celebrate our birthday, you can share it with us on social media. Hashtag KY225.
225 years. Open as we speak, Seth Weed, is spring wild turkey season. That is going on until the 7th day of May.
One of my favorite seasons.
By the end of the season, will you have brought home 1 turkey or 2?
Hopefully 2. I'd be more than happy with 1. It's a very hit or miss proposition for me, but I have a lot of fun doing it. It's such an interactive hunting sport, which is one of the reasons I enjoy it so much. And it's, spring, it's just a great time to get outside. You enjoy being outdoors this time of year, and chasing turkeys through the woods is a great way to experience the outdoors in Kentucky. You think deer season's popular? You think turkey season's popular? On May 19th, maybe one of the most popular seasons of all opens. I see your eyes are open wide. Yeah, you don't know what that is. What is it?
Bullfrog season.
Oh, man.
So Friday, May 19th, the opening of bullfrog season. Squirrel hunting, May 20th through June 16th. Also coming up on that week leading up to Memorial Day, we're going to have a special show that week here on Kentucky Afield Radio with a young lady who was in a terrible boating accident back in, I hate to use the word accident, it was a crash, it was a disaster, it was horrific, back in 2010 where a drunk boater hit her. She was on her wave runner. And, buddy, she wound up in a coma. She wound up losing a leg and all sorts of injuries. But she lived to tell about it, and she's going to be on with us that week. National Safe Boating Week runs May 20th through the 26th. Are you a boater?
I do not own a boat. I'm fortunate to have several friends that own boats, though, so I am a part-time boater, I guess, maybe. Yeah.
I think everybody in Kentucky would say, yes,
everybody is, yeah.
I'm a boater. Even though they don't own a boat, I'm a boater. I have a canoe, but I love to be out on a boat. I'll always take a life jacket.
It's good to remind ourselves of that, and I was fortunate that when I grew up and went fishing with my grandfather, we never got in the boat without our life jackets on. It was just part of the trip. I never thought about it as, being different or dweeby or whatever else. So, if you're listening and you have kids, instill it into them early, make it a habit, and then, they won't have to worry about it.
You have alluded to the fact, Seth Weed, that you have this extended family in Romania. Mm-hmm. You have a fiancé. Has there been a date set?
Yes, October 7th.
You were saving for a ring, it seemed like, the last time we were on the air.
Yes.
And so, how many carats? One, yeah. One is ample. So the date has been set. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Can we give her a first name?
Yeah, her name's Megan.
Megan?
Mm-hmm.
And Seth. Congratulations, sir. 10/7/17 will be here before you know it.
We have time to think, but not time to waste, right?
To learn more about anything that we may have talked about, what are those websites again? KentuckyTourism.com and parks.ky.gov. Seth Weed, I appreciate you coming by. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Up next, what's on the menu in your backyard? Certainly songbirds want to know. Our state avian biologist will give us tips on bird feeders, bird baths, bird houses. That's all coming up in the next half hour. Meanwhile, our fishing report is standing by, so stay here. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Kentucky Afield Radio, and if you would like to hear this show again or share it on Facebook or email the link to a friend, pretty easily found, those links. Just go to our Facebook page, put Kentucky Afield Radio in the search box, and there you will find them. Also on YouTube, and we are a podcast on iTunes. Just put Kentucky Afield Radio in the search box, and there we are. Our fishing report now.
In western Kentucky, it's springtime, and that often thinks of crappie, bass, red ear, everything moving shallow to spawn. So it's kind of a mixed bag. They will catch a lot of crappie out deep off of jigs and minnows. Some of the crappie have moved up and have already finished spawning, so I wouldn't just eliminate the shallow water. There's still some crappie up there trying to spawn or finishing up spawning. So there again, jigs and minnows fishing around the structure along the shoreline, the stake beds, and the back ends of the embayments. The red ear moved up into the mustard flowers. They're not spawning yet, but they ought to be getting close. Below the dams, they're discharging water, so the tailwaters may be kind of messed up for the time being, but it ought to settle down soon. White bass, striped bass, yellow bass, hybrids, and catfish all below the dams using live bait like skipjack and shad. Well, this is Paul Reister, and I hope you find a good day to go fishing.
This is Rob Rold in the Northwestern Fishery District. Bass fishing's been pretty good at No Lynn the last couple of weeks. Fish are shallow in the backs of the creeks, which is where the majority of the shad are. Shallow crankbaits, spinnerbaits, weighted plastic worms have all been producing fairly well. Rough River Lake and No Lynn River Lake are both about 6-7 feet below summer pool, and on a steady climb, just the lack of rain has them a little bit below their curve. Crappie fishing's been really good at both No Lynn and Rough. However, the last few days it's slowing down as the crappie have completed their spawning and are heading back to a little bit deeper water. Lower No Lynn's pretty clear. They're about 5 feet deep. Upper ends of the lakes are a little bit murkier, and they're catching them about 2 feet deep or so. Please remember, be safe on the water. Always wear your life jackets.
This is Jeff Crosby with the Central Fishery District Fishing Report. Lake temperatures are running in the low 70s. Largemouth bass fishing is good at many of our area lakes. Many of the fish are coming off the spawn, the big females. Good places to fish would be the mouth of creeks, fishing crankbaits, jerk baits, also fishing jigs around shoreline cover to produce several quality fish. Also, crappie fishing at Taylorsville is still very good. Many fish are being caught on 5 minnows or crappie jigs around cover, down trees, or around standing timber. It's a great opportunity to catch some great crappie this time of year. And don't forget about beaver, Neely Lake, Elmer Davis Lake, and Corinth for panfish this time of year. So grab a pole and enjoy some great fishing.
Do I have class today? My memory's not what it used to be, but there is one thing that I'll never forget. Once upon a time, I had my whole life ahead of me. Then, I was hit by a drunk boater. My brain injuries were severe. I was 13. Now, I make notes for the simplest reminders, like this. If you boat, boat sober.
Kentucky Boating and Conservation Officers
And survivors of boating tragedies remind you.
sober boating saves lives. For Mother's Day, how many moms would like to go fishing? What if I said, for Mother's Day, family time, real conversations?
Perfect.
That's more like it. And that's what happens when you fish. You catch up on life. Kentucky Fish and Wildlife says learn more about lakes near your family that are stocked and ready to hook memories this Mother's Day at fw.ky.gov. We're back on Kentucky Afield Radio. It's Charlie Baglan in our second half hour. When you think of places that you might want to call a hub of wildlife activity, wetlands, prairies, forests, of course, all leap to mind. But what about your backyard? If you garden, if you grow flowers, have trees and shrubs, you'll be surprised at what calls your yard home. Snakes, frogs, rabbits, butterflies, and the most visible of them all are songbirds. About half of the 350 species of birds that live in Kentucky through the year are songbirds. Kate Slankard, who is the songbird biologist with the Kentucky Wildlife Diversity Program, is with us now. Kate, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It's that time of year we start seeing birds coming back to our backyards that have been gone for the winter.
Right about now, we're getting a lot of birds coming back from Central and South America, where they spent the winter, coming back to spend the summer in Kentucky. And so warblers and vireos, most of the things that eat bugs have to migrate for the winter time. And so we've had our cardinals around all winter. Our robins showed up earlier in spring. Right about now, we're having bluebirds coming back to our bluebird boxes, and all of our insect-eating birds are coming back.
Here's a question I have about birds. Now, I'm going to base this on what my wife and I see, basically from our backyard deck. Is it wrong if you see, say, a bird has started to build a nest, I don't know, somewhere on your porch maybe, that you really don't want the nest to be? Do you just live with it?
Well, that's a good question. Most of them, the native birds, are protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. That's a federal law that says it's against the law to kill native birds or their eggs or young. The thing is that a lot of those nests that show up in inopportune places belong to non-native birds, and so the first step there would be to see what species you're dealing with. Our non-native birds that can build nests in problematic areas are house sparrows, European starlings, and rock pigeons. And if it's one of those three species and the nest is in an inconvenient spot for you, it doesn't really matter necessarily where they're at. In the nesting cycle, you can remove the nest, no problem. Like, for instance, a lot of times we'll find European starlings building nests in a dryer vent, which is a problem. So just pull that nest out. If it belongs to a starling or a house sparrow, no problem. If it's a robin or a Carolina wren, these are native species that sometimes build nests in inconvenient areas. You can remove those nests before the bird lays eggs in them, but after the bird lays eggs in the nest, you should leave it be according to federal law.
Does that interrupt the bird's cycle?
It is going to be an inconvenience for the bird if you remove their nest prior to them laying eggs in it, but they'll be okay. They will build a nest in another location. You actually might have to remove the nest a couple times to persuade the bird to build their nest elsewhere, but you're not really doing any harm to the bird by doing that. And, of course,
those eggs are going to be laid on a certain date period. Mama bird knows that, right?
Right.
And they're building this nest in advance.
Right. If you can't get to the nest before the eggs are laid, something that's important to remember, if you come home and there's a robin nest on your porch light and that's maybe inconvenient for you, those eggs are going to take maybe 12 days to hatch, and then the chicks will be in the nest for maybe another 10 to 12 days. And so you're looking at a maximum of a month of this inconvenience being present in your life. And after the young leave the nest, you can remove that nest when it's empty. So it really doesn't take that long. You know, might be worth considering before you remove the nest, just is that inconvenience really that big of a deal to you to, you know, maybe you can put up with it for a month, wait for those young to fledge.
This is going to sound like a silly question, but does a bird, just as a matter of course, build 2 or 3 nests just in the event that maybe one would get blown down or they have a fallback?
Songbirds do not do that. Some raptor species will do that, have backup nests for stormy days, but songbirds don't do that. They put all their effort into one nest for the season. So
let's talk about my favorite here, hummingbirds. My wife and I love to look at hummingbirds on our back porch, and we're wondering a few things. We talked about this yesterday, and she says, do you need to have the hummingbird feeder in place before the hummingbird comes to your yard? If they come and it's not there, will they just fly on by?
No, I wouldn't worry too much about that. You might have, you know, a little bit of an advantage if you get your feeder up early for having it noticed and used a little quicker, but you can put a hummingbird feeder up at any time during the late spring or summer and probably have a good likelihood that you'll attract birds. Especially in the late summer, you're probably going to attract more birds because there's going to be young hummingbirds that have recently come out of the nest.
Sure. And
then there'll be migrating birds that are starting to pass through already, say in August.
I have noticed that some places you can go, they'll have a dozen hummingbird feeders and they're all full. Hummingbirds just flitting around. But in some others' backyards, you just won't see them very often. What can you do, Kate, to optimize what you can do to attract the most hummingbirds?
Well, it just depends on the timing and also the location a little bit. So there's going to be some luck when it comes to timing. Like I said, in late summer, you're going to get large amounts of hummingbirds at feeders almost anywhere because there's just plain more hummingbirds out there. There's fledgling birds coming out of the nest and there's migrating birds using them. But there's some locations that are better than others habitat-wise, and that's why you're going to see more feeders there. Areas that have a lot of shrubland or kind of woodland-type habitat will attract more hummingbirds inherently. Another thing you can do is planting hummingbird-friendly plants. Hummingbirds love nectar-producing flowers. Plant things like salvia, cardinal flower, different types of nectar-producing hummingbird flowers in your yard to get more birds attracted there.
Speaking of nectar, when you fill your hummingbird feeder, you can buy the pre-mixed stuff. It looks like a red Kool-Aid or punch, or you can make it out of the powder. Is one better than another?
There's been some studies that have shown that anything with red dye in it is actually bad for hummingbirds, and unfortunately the companies that produce the nectar still haven't gotten the dye out of the nectar. But you can purchase a non-dyed hummingbird food, or you can mix your own at home just using sugar and water. You can use 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. And again, don't add any red dye to it, and that'll work fine. The hummingbird feeder itself could have some red on it to help attract the birds, because the birds, they do like red flowers. They show up quickly for red things, and so just buying a hummingbird feeder with a little bit of red on it and then putting clear food in it can be very good at successfully attracting hummingbirds. Tie a little piece of red flagging tape on a clear hummingbird feeder, and that would be enough to get the birds to show up and just see if they could feed from it.
Hummingbirds, as far as dates, when do they come to Kentucky? When do they leave?
Hummingbirds are showing up towards the middle of April. They're going to be just about gone from Kentucky in the middle of September. You can take your feeders down.
Do they return to the same yard every year, or is that just a myth?
I think they do. I'm not 100% positive on that, but I think there's a fair amount of site fidelity with them where they come back to the same places to nest.
Your yard would have to be the best for any bird anywhere, am I right?
Well, you would think so, but being a bird biologist requires a lot of travel, which means I have a hard time keeping my hummingbird feeders full because I'll be gone so much. So I bet your yard's probably better than mine.
As far as birds are concerned, I had heard one of the best things you can do for backyard birds is provide water, as in a bird bath. Mm-hmm. What's your take on that?
Well, it depends a little bit on the time of year. In spring, water is fairly plentiful, and so you won't see quite as much bird bath usage. But late in the summer, and especially when things freeze in the winter, water can be really important for birds. And a bird bath can always be good to keep up just because you never know what might show up, especially when it's close to a bird feeder. You'll maybe have a little bit more clientele at your bird feeder if you have water as well.
There's a variety of foods out there. I know suet and sunflower seed, and you can buy the mixed bag of bird seed. Is one better than another, say, for the warmer months?
There are seed mixes and seeds that are a little bit, in my opinion, superior to others. Some of the cheaper seed mixes that you see have a lot of corn and millet in them. That kind of thing can be appealing for feeding things like, say, doves, things that feed on the ground, but might not appeal quite so much to some of these seed eaters that like to hang from hanging bird feeders. And so what I mostly focus on with my bird feeding anyway is feeding black oil sunflower seeds, because that's an affordable seed that will attract a wide variety of seed-eating species, some of the prettier birds. It also doesn't bring in European starlings and house sparrows and things you don't really care to see at your feeder. The corn really brings those birds in. So when it comes to suet, I see that as a winter food. It spoils quickly in the summertime, and I just don't see birds coming to it, at least not the preferable species in the summertime.
I remember I was a little boy, and I don't know if my mother was right or wrong when doing this, but let's say I didn't like bread crusts on my sandwich, so I'd pull them off. She'd say, well, just take those out in the backyard and throw them out for the birds. Or you could throw biscuits or rolls or any bread or cookies or maybe potato chips, something like that. Yeah. Is that good or bad for feeding birds?
Well, you probably weren't doing any harm. Those types of foods are not the most nutritious for birds, and so I wouldn't recommend doing it in large amounts, but a little bit of that, that's going to probably attract a little bit more of, like I said, some of those undesirable species like those starlings and house sparrows. But, of course, you're probably not hurting anything doing a little bit of that.
So what type of birds are we going to have out there that we'll use and be grateful that we have put a nest box out there?
The all-time favorite is probably the eastern bluebird.
That's the cutest bird out there.
They're really fun to have in your yard. Very, very neat to watch. Very pretty.
I like the little bird that'll hang upside of the finch. Is that a finch? It'll hang upside down on the finch feeder.
Oh, yeah. Well, and titmice and chickadees are famous for doing that. And they will also use nest boxes. The same design as a bluebird box. Chickadees and titmice will use. They tend to like it if you put it a little bit closer to the woods or particularly pine trees. Another bird that will use a bluebird type nest box is a tree swallow.
More on backyard birding and keeping predators at bay as well. Still ahead on Kentucky Afield Radio. Back in our final few minutes on Kentucky Afield Radio, my name is Charlie Baglan, speaking with avian biologist Kate Slankard, building a birdhouse. I did it as a kid. An important feature of any birdhouse is going to be that front door, that hole, and the size of the hole can dictate what birds are going to be able to use it. Kate, let's say, what do you need for bluebirds?
It's 1.5 inches.
If you truly want to attract a bluebird or the smaller birds, but you've got a larger hole, does that just invite something else to come in and maybe take over the nest?
It can, and so we recommend using 1.5 inch size hole, no bigger than that, because that restricts the nest box to the species that you're wanting in there. If the hole gets bigger, it may invite a European starling in or a house sparrow, and again, those are non-native species that we don't want to encourage. So,
I was taught once it's good to hang bird feeders at different levels. Let's say you have a tree and you have several branches. One may be 2 feet off the ground, one may be 6, one may be 8.
The idea behind that would be to attract a variety of different species. You're probably going to please just about any kind of bird that shows up at your feeding station if you have lots of different feeders. Not even just at different levels, but also different types of feeders.
Yeah.
The kind that you have to hang from and the kind that have perches and maybe one of those hopper feeders for the doves and cardinals that aren't quite as agile.
So where should you put a birdhouse? In a tree or on a fence post? Where do you suggest?
It sounds like the wrong way to think, but we don't tend to recommend trees just because they're so easily climbable by predators. Things like snakes and raccoons can really get into those nest boxes easy. A fence post, if you already have a fence in your yard, can be a great place for a nest box. Typically, we put them 3 or 4 feet off the ground. We try to keep them out of the way of regular areas that pets would use, just in case, a baby bird kind of falls out of the front of it. You wouldn't want your dog to be able to get to that. If you don't have fence posts, just putting a T-post or a 4x4 post or whatever in the ground can be a great way to get a nest box up and kind of keep it out of the hands of the predators.
I have 2 cats.
Cats are great as house pets. They are not meant to be part of nature, and so they've actually been found to be a quite important cause of decline for songbirds. So if you have cats, it's a great idea to just keep them inside.
I've noticed a few squirrels at bird feeders.
That's a tough one. Oftentimes at my house, what I've done to keep the squirrels off the feeders, and the only problem there is that the squirrels can just consume a little bit too much of your food. I've put my feeders on shepherd's poles, and I've got them like maybe 15 feet or so away from any trees, and so the squirrels can't jump to them. Some people will put baffles made out of sheet metal on their poles to keep the squirrels from jumping up from the ground. It's really just kind of a guessing game of like adjusting the location of your feeders to figure out where you can put them to where squirrels can't get to them.
I guess a squirrel will eat anything. Are they attracted to any food you would put out for a bird?
Those corn cobs are particularly attractive to squirrels. Some people will put those out for woodpeckers. Any kind of corn really seems to bring in the squirrels, but they'll come for also just about any kind of birdseed.
You can't just stand at the window and shake your finger at the squirrel and say, go away.
No.
Doesn't do it.
No, you sure can't, and so that's a tough one. Takes a lot of finagling in your own yard usually to figure it out.
How far apart? Say you're going to put up more than one birdhouse. How far apart should they be?
If you have a farm or a large area that you want to kind of saturate with birdhouses to try to get as many, say, nesting pairs of bluebirds as possible, usually we try to put them up about 50 yards apart, and that's far enough for each box to usually attract a different pair of birds. Putting them any closer than that probably won't get you any more birds.
You've done all these things. You've done them well. You have the bird houses, the bird bath, the bird feeders, the variety of foods. You're going to get a lot of traffic at these bird feeders. And every now and then you're going to come up with something, look out the window and say, whoa, there's a hawk. Well, I don't know if you'll see a peregrine falcon or an eagle or what, but what will show up beyond the norm?
So when you're feeding birds, you're creating sort of an unnatural situation where you're drawing a lot of songbirds together, found in a way that's kind of rarely found in nature. And so the most common predator that will be attracted to this situation, outside of house cats, of course, is the Cooper's hawk. And they will often show up at feeders. They feed on birds out at nature, so you've created like a buffet for them.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of calls about this from concerned folks. Cooper's hawk at your feeder, of course, it isn't maybe what you want to see, having a bird get taken, but that is something that's going to happen in nature whether you're watching it or not. The Cooper's hawk is going to eat it as lunch. The Cooper's hawk is a native species, so it's okay that they're benefiting from that. But if it bothers you, and if the hawk gets particularly dependent on that feeder where it's showing up day after day and that's just not something you want to see, you can take your feeders down for a few days and the hawk is going to move on, find someplace else to eat. You probably won't see it back again for a little while.
I hadn't given that any thought. That's smart.
Another thing I should mention about feeders is because of that sort of unnatural situation we're causing, it can be a place for outbreak for disease. It's very important to keep your feeders clean. We have a disease in Kentucky that's called, the common name for it is house finch eye disease. And it's spread on common feeding surfaces, and house finches and goldfinches are the main species that get it. Of course, these species love to hang out at bird feeders a lot. So if you see any goldfinches or house finches that have puffy eyes or they're not flying well, they appear to be sick, it's good to immediately take your feeders down, dip them all in bleach water with at least like a 5% bleach water solution, and leave them down for about 2 weeks before you put them back up so that you don't help the spread of this disease.
Is this something you see often enough to worry about?
It's quite common. I've had it show up at my bird feeders, and we don't see a major decline in these birds because of it, but of course that's not why you're feeding the birds. You don't want to help a disease spread, and so it's just good to stay ahead of it when you see it.
Okay, if anybody wanted a good website to go to learn a little bit more, where do you suggest?
Well, if you want to put up nest boxes, I'd say the North American Bluebird Society is a great website for nest boxes. And then if you're interested in more tips on bird feeding and identification help with species of birds, the Cornell website, allaboutbirds.org, is great for that.
And, of course, the Fish and Wildlife website has lots of information. fw.ky.gov. Put songbirds in the search box. I appreciate you being on the job, Kate, because the birds love you for it. I appreciate what you do for them.
Well, thank you. Thanks a lot for having me.
We're out of time. This is Charlie Baglan inviting you to join us in a week, and we'll go inside outdoors again here on Kentucky Afield Radio.